السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Inshallah ta'ala, today we would try inshallah to finish all the slides that are left for the chapter of purification. Let me see if I can share with you hopefully I got the link right here. Inshallah, just give me a minute. I should be able to do it now, inshallah. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now with you. Okay. Inshallah, we're continuing the fiqh of worship. So I promised you to start today with what we call nifas, which is the post-childbirth bleeding. So that's just a specific duration and specific time that comes to a woman after she gives birth. And the definition of it, that it's the external blood resulting from a woman giving birth. So that's alhamdulillah obvious. And we don't have much confusion and disagreement among the scholars because, as I said, that's a specific time and it's very obvious. It's something that just is not like a regular, like a period or like half or spotting, or is it really full fluid? It's not. Khalas, it's really known. Every woman that gives birth, right after giving a birth, she has that type of bleeding. So that's why it makes it way more easier to discuss the ruling of nifas. So that's something that of the terms and the terminologies that you want to also learn, which is the post-childbirth bleeding. That's called nifas or nafas. So either or is good, inshallah. The definition: external blood resulting from a woman giving birth. For that particular blood, no minimal length for post-childbirth bleeding. So there is really no minimal length to it. There is nothing that, that would say it's 1 day or 3 days or a cap of 10 days. Khalas, it's known right after birth, you have this bleeding and the bleeding continues until it stops and a woman clears from that type of bleeding. She's all done, inshallah. Maximum duration of post-childbirth bleeding. As of maximum, putting a cap to the end of it, so there is no minimum duration to it. There is no such thing as, well, say, there is, if it starts, then if it clears and it doesn't clear, as we said, this is not as confusing as the period because the blood is there, and that's why there is no minimal duration to it. Khalas, it starts immediately right after and it continues for a good while. So there is no such thing, there is nothing except maybe Allahu Alam for very rare situation, and that rare situation has to deal with that issue case by case, where they have to ask the imam of their, like, she did not bleed after or she bled only for a few days and she stops. That's different, but we're talking about the regular cases. The maximum would be, majority of the scholars say 40 days. That's maximum. However, the Maliki and Shafi'i gives it up to 60 days because of the different biological state of women. It's different. Some women, they bleed more, and it's actual bleeding. It's actual nafas bleeding. So it's very obvious. And from gathering so many experiences in life, the Maliki and Shafi'i said, no, we cannot cap it up to 40 because of the average woman, because we know that for a fact there is still a good segment in society where they have an extended period of nafas, extended period of post-child birth. So we are going to apply the ruling. However, they said, but still there has to be a cap. So we just can't can't, have it forever, because subhanallah, you never know, maybe some of the women, their body just changes, and just because of pregnancy and just because of giving birth, the body keeps discharging some type of spotting and blood and what have you. That's why they said, okay, up to 60 days, and khalas, after that, a woman can just take a bath and ghusl, and just get out of that state, and goes back to prayer, goes back to all the permissibility that she had before having that blood of nafas happening or starting. Now, with this slide, the impermissible acts during menses and post-childbirth bleeding. What's agreed upon among the scholars of the impermissible acts during menses or the post-childbirth bleeding is fasting. A woman should not be fasting while she has while she's on her period, or while she's going through her nifas duration. Praying, she should not be praying either. Spousal sexual intercourse should not also be happening. Those three are agreed upon among all scholars. Now, there is a note. It's agreed upon by Muslim jurists that whoever has intercourse with his wife during her menses has inevitably committed a major sin. So now we're saying impermissible acts, but what if actually it does happen? So we have to also learn what's the consequence. So we understand that it's haram, but what if it actually happened? And it does happen. It's not like it never. It happened during the time of Prophet Muhammad with some of the companions. It happened with many generations after, and it's happening even up to now, where we still receive questions about this happening between spouses who, might get relaxed sometime, and they get so comfortable to being able to control themselves, and then all of a sudden something actually happens, and it puts them in that state of haram. So what's the consequences? Is there expiation for committing this sin? So for the Hanafi, Maliki, and Shafi'i, so that kind of puts it all to you with three schools, there is really no expiation that has been specified in our religion. But it is obligatory to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness and for and to repent, because we are stating that it's a major sin. It should not be happening. Now, for the Hanbali school, they say there is actually, besides repentance and besides asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, the Hanbali school says, besides that, there is an expiation, and it's obligatory. And according to, they did, because remember, the Hanbali school is the last school, so it received way more ahadith and saying of the Prophet ﷺ, and collection of his ahadith and saying, way more than the schools before it. So they actually put their hands on a hadith and a saying of the Prophet ﷺ that they use as an evidence that, to them it was reported in one of the hadith that Prophet ﷺ said to pay charity of the amount of a dinar or half of a dinar. So there is some type of monetary expiation and kafara. Now, the question for us and for the class, what will we do? We always do what is more cautious. So we know that we should do absolutely repentance. It's obligatory. Asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, that is obligatory because it's a sinful act. And then we pay that kafara. A dinar is just more of a measure that is more of like a unified, universal currency, very similar to like what we have right now as a dollar. It's like an internationally known. So you would see that the kafarat are always by the dinar. It varies. So I don't know exactly the amount out of the top of my mind now, but inshallah I can look it up for you, inshallah. Now, the disagreed upon impermissible acts during menses and post-childbirth bleeding. So what we talked about was what they agreed upon. Now the disagreed upon is, as you can remember with our previous classes, reading the Quran. Because, the nafas period is no different than the period itself, the menstruation itself. So it's the same ruling. The majority says that it's impermissible. Imam Malik saying, and Hanbali, as we discussed, opinion selected by Ibn Taymiyyah, that it is permissible. But here we are talking about, when we are saying Imam Malik and saying in the Hanbali, we are here specifically talking about post-childbirth bleeding, right? So we're not talking about in general of menses. So this is just the differentiations, and inshallah I'll try to maybe make the difference as the title says for both. But remember that the actual period, the actual menstruation, you remember when we studied that it was the 4 schools that would say no, she cannot touch the Quran. Now, touching or carrying a copy of the Quran. So that was for reading the Quran. Now for actual physical touching or carrying it, the majority says it's prohibited. And the Zahiri, as remember when we talked about during her menses, the Zahiri still says whether it's menses or whether it's her period, whether it's her period or whether it's her nafas, which is the post-childbirth bleeding, they have no difference, that she can read the Quran, they have no problem with that, and she can touch it and she can carry it. This is a continuation of the disagreed upon. Staying in the masjid, majority prohibited, same about like what she studied during her menses. Zahiri and Al-Muzni and Imam Muzni, not prohibited. Imam Ahmad and Imam Ishaq, conditionally not prohibited. If you remember, when we talked about the conditions of at least having a wudu on, the condition is performing ablution, wudu, following occurrence that caused the person to be in a major ritual impurity, with the exception of a ministry, with one exception. So let me clarify that, just because we did in the previous slides, but just to remember. So you have majority says absolutely not. She cannot stay in the masjid. Then the Zahiri say no, she can, no problem. Then you have in between, and that in between is Imam, like the school of Imam Ahmad and Imam Ishaq, where you say, okay, she is on a state of janaba, just janaba. Let's say that the woman had sexual intercourse with her husband, so she doesn't have her period on, but somehow she didn't have time to take ghusl and she rushed to the masjid to do something. Maybe she's a teacher or what have you. And the ruling here helps to say that they say that as long as she makes wudu, then she is able to be physically in the masjid. If it's a janaba because of that intercourse or because of a wet dream or what have you, she still needs to do the ghusl, no question about it. Now, the same school that puts that condition says that's only like if she has a wet dream or if she had a sexual intercourse with her husband, but she never took ghusl, a shower. However, if she has her period on, they say no, she can't be physically in the masjid. So Imam Ahmad and Imam Ishaq will add their voice to the majority of the scholars that she can't stay because of her period. Imam, the Zahiri school, have no problem. She can stay, teacher, not teacher, anybody. There is no obvious dalil and proof that actually prohibits that. So passing through the masjid, the Hanafi and Maliki prohibited. We said this is like somebody that has to go do something, pick up something, and it could be very well a teacher or an admin or a staff or something, but she has to go through the masjid, whatever. So the Hanafi and Maliki says, no, it's prohibited. She shouldn't physically go through. But the Shafi'i and Hanbali, and also, one of the top knowledgeable Sahaba, Sayyidina Ibn Abbas and Ibn Mas'ud as well, say that it's not prohibited. If she's just passing by, there is no issue. Again, her impurity is not physical. She's not najis by herself at all. That's consensus. And even those who said prohibited, they made it not because she's physically impure. No, it is just because they were so much cautious about the impermissibility and not to cause any type of traces of the blood or somehow mishaps if she sits in the masjid. Subhanallah, you know how some women they bleed heavily. So no matter what of protection they have, there might be some type of accident. So because of being so much cautious, the generations through got it always to be on the side of, you know what, we're not going to take chances, because if we tell people what, no, khalas, she's not allowed, and that's it. That's where the Zahiri comes and said, no, in order for you to be that adamant about saying no, not allowed, you have to have not any type of dalil, because they do have dalil, but these are the general dalil. That's not really precise and explicit to say a woman who is going through her menstruation or she has her period on, she cannot physically sit. If that was the case, then khalas, it's a done deal and the case is closed. But they don't have that. And that's why the Zahiri said, listen, unless it's explicit, we're not going to tell any woman that it's haram for her to sit or to pass by. Prolonged blood flow. Flowing of blood from a woman exceeding the duration or period of her menses or post-childbirth bleeding. Durations have been disagreed upon as stated in previous slides. So we're talking about, like, this is more of just recap of what we discussed before. The note is, ending of blood flow is determined by, how do we, like, let's say now, after that duration, the normal duration that she is familiar with, she tends to have it as a trend. When does she actually decide, now I can take ghusl, now I can pray, now I can go back to normal activities with her family, a spousal relationship? When can she say, khalas, now I can do it? Because that hesitation puts her always in a very awkward position. It's been 7 days, 10 days, she hasn't been approaching her husband, and she hasn't been reading the Quran, she hasn't been physically in the masjid, she hasn't been with so many restrictions. Now she wants to go back to her normal routine. So she wants to know, when do I decide? Knowing the trend, as we said, when not saying blood for 24 hours. So she clears, but she's not really sure if it's absolutely. Can she take chances and go back to her prayer? At least the answer is yes, depending on her trend. If her trend is that most of the time she clears, after a few hours she still sees some traces, no, khalas, that's the case, then she waits 24 hours. But if her trend is no, when she clears most of the time, nothing comes back, no traces of blood comes back, khalas, then she can immediately do it and clears, takes a bath, goes back to regular activities without worrying about it, because she knows the most possibility that she's not going to come back to have any traces. If she clears, she clears. But the 24 hours is put here for like maximum cautious duration. Or not saying blood for the amount of time between two consecutive prayers. So this is for a woman that pertains mainly to the first scenario that I told you, a woman that knows her body, that most of the time when she clears, no traces comes back. Does she have to wait 24 hours? No, she doesn't. How long does she wait? The scholar said she waits just in the duration between two prayers. So that happens at time of dhuhr. She didn't pray dhuhr because she wasn't really sure. right? But then right after the time of Asr, there is, after she checks, there's no traces of blood either, as she is used to. Khalas, at that time, she takes a ghusl and she prays Asr and she moves on, inshallah ta'ala. And that, inshallah ta'ala, should put all our bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, the chapter of purification. You see here the summary of purification. We have the purification in general. We talked about ritual purification, and we talked about physical purification. So the physical is known, but the ritual, what do we mean by to say ritual, like ritually impure? Physically impure, we know like somebody is on a janaba, or like physically has a najasa on, or what have you, like we talked before. But that's physical. Somebody has a najasa, it has to be clean. What if it's ritual? Ritual is when she has her period, when someone has wet dream, when someone after birth. We're saying that there is a janaba, but it's not physical impurity. That's why we call it ritual purification. So ritual purification consists of major ritual impurity, that's janaba, and we have minor ritual impurity, that someone loses his or her wudu. All right. Now, under major ritual impurity, that is janaba, we have the janaba, which is when someone, a spousal relationship, so she does not have her period, but she because of her relationship with her husband, just because they had intercourse, it puts her under the major ritual impurity. But the second she takes a bath, a ghusl, she goes back to her normal, pure state of purity. So she goes back to her regular activities. That's called janaba. But that only happens when she takes a ghusl. However, if she's going through her menses or post-childbirth bleeding, that does not apply like janaba, because janaba is just temporarily. But for the menses, no, even if she takes a ghusl, she takes a full bath, but she still has her period on. She's still restricted. She can't go back with a spousal relationship like intercourse. She cannot go back to the issue of Quran and touching the Quran if she carries that opinion. She cannot go back to praying. She cannot go back to fasting. She cannot go back to tawaf if she's at Hajj and Umrah. So that's just one slide that summarizes the whole thing, inshallah ta'ala. And that would end it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. We are done, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, with the purification, all the prerequisites of purification knowledge that you need to learn before getting ready for the most important worship act of our life, and that is the connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as-salah. And it's called salah, means silah, means connection. Exactly what that means. It's the best worship act because it is absolutely the top worship act that makes a servant connects with his creator, inshallah ta'ala. With that, inshallah, I will end the presentation, and inshallah ta'ala try to take your questions. I see I have now 3 questions. Many doctors tell a woman post-childbirth to avoid intercourse for 6 weeks, even if bleeding has stopped, because there is still healing going on. Does the women's doctor's advice take precedence in this case? She could still pray though if bleeding has stopped. Yes, I think this question is extremely important and crucial, and Islam comes to absolutely advocates for that. A physician's advice is highly taken into any Islamic verdict, by the way, any Islamic verdict. That's why you see all the Islamic councils, especially now during this pandemic with the corona thing, with the COVID-19 thing. They would not give any Islamic ruling until they connect with physicians, top physicians with experiences in that field, not just any physician. And physicians, medical care, all the expertise who are into the field of viruses, bacteria, all that knowledge that they know, in order for them to understand fully the case, in order to give a verdict of what should and what should not be happening. Like, the janaza ruling, should we wash, not wash, should we make tayammum, not tayammum, all that. We cannot give just purely Islamic verdict without listening to the advice of the expertise from the medical field. Saying that, because of that high level um, of recognition that Islam comes to recognize, the answer is yes. If the physician, if the doctor tells Yani, despite the fact that nafas is done after 6 weeks and you're clear, and from an Islamic point of view, you can go back to prayer, you can go back to fasting, you can go back to reading Quran, touching Quran, you can go back to all your activities. You can also go back to your spousal relationship, having intercourse with your spouse, with your husband. But the question here is, what if that's permissible Islamically, but then the doctor says that's not a good idea? And knowing the body of that pregnant woman and the process that she went through and the nature of the delivery that she had, and after also checking her, there was a big concern that that woman was not really ready to have sexual relationship with her husband. So Islam comes to absolutely support that, and the husband should understand and should take it as mandatory. Honestly, should take it with no difference than not being able to have intercourse with his wife during her period, not having intercourse with his wife during her nafas, and that is the post childbirth bleeding and what have you. As he is fine with that, and as he is submissive to that and what have you, he should be as well, with the advice of the doctor, because the health of his wife should come as a top priority. That's no question about it, and that's agreed upon. I have never seen anyway in the classical books or even in the contemporary one that any scholar come close to say, it doesn't matter, even if a physician, even if that's going to hurt her health, or like bring some consequences, negative consequences to her health, she should be just submissive to her husband if he asks her for intercourse relationship. That might be something said by some local imams and some villages around the world, and some um, limited places where, but honestly, even when maybe with some cities, but I was very careful to say I have not read a verdict of a scholar, because a scholar is completely different. Than a scholar is the one that is qualified to give a verdict, because of the vast amount of knowledge that they have, and because of the council that they belong to. We are ready to take their verdicts. So you have never heard that as even a suggestion from any of these councils or imams. So if that was ever said, it could be very well said by local imams in some villages, in some towns, and somewhere the culture effect and pressure makes a huge interference within his verdict. Second question: what is your opinion on reading and carrying the Quran during the period and after childbirth? If you choose yes, you can. Would you be accountable on the day of judgment? So this question is a very good question that pertains to this, and also pertains to many of the rulings. I want you, as student of knowledge now, to know one maxim that we have in fiqh, one rule that you need to know in fiqh. any matter, any fiqh matter that has legitimate disagreement among the scholars, you have no problem of choosing which one you want, even if that is more convenient for you. Absolutely no problem. And that is by consensus. You read all the usul, all the scholars, they say that's our opinion, and we are to apply to ourselves our opinion, that what we adopt. But they have never said that anyone else that applies something else is deviant and they are sinful and what have you. They can't even come close to say that because it's an area of disagreement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it that way. All you can say, the max you can say, like my way or the highway. It's like my opinion is the strongest, my opinion, whatever, but you can never bash others and say others are deviants and they are what have you, because it's an area of disagreement. And that's why they adapt to them. They're sinful because he, as a scholar, believes that she should not touch the Quran. So he believes that he must tell her cannot touch the Quran. You just can't, it's haram, because that's what he adopts. And for her, she has to follow that because she adopts that opinion. So she cannot, feel sometimes emotional because she believes that that's the right opinion based on a very strong dalil. So she has to stick to it. But in general, if someone is neutral, I have no adaptation. I'm adaptation to anything. I haven't really adopted any opinion. I'm ready to listen to both sides and then choose what I feel like is more reasonable to me or more convenient to my status or to my way of life and what have you. There is no issue. Many examples of that. And there is nothing to say that a person is sinful. Talk about wiping over socks. Remember when we talked about it? You have very strict rules on some of the schools of thought that said, if there was not a travel, if there was not a legitimate reason for wiping, like travel, like extreme cold, like really, really, really inconvenience of taking off the shoes and the socks and what have you and washing. If it wasn't for that, you cannot wipe. Remember those who said you cannot wipe, they would come and tell you like all that convenience that you do nowadays is not allowed. That's haram to them. But it's not haram for you to adopt that because the other side has also a legitimate proof. So someone will ask me as a layman, just a normal, basic, ordinary student of knowledge. I have no idea how to say legitimate or not legitimate. I have no idea. So that's why you are allowed to pick and choose because you are within a disagreement opinions. There should be no one come to absolutely claim that everything I adopt is the correct thing and everybody else is wrong. You can't do that. Then we're saying that all the scholars are deviants and all they messed up and they told people to do haram things. We can't do that. No one, of course, nowadays can come close to touch the four imams or any of the known scholars, but they are ready to bash and destroy like anybody nowadays that goes against their own opinion. But if you tell them, well, the opinion that I'm carrying, by the way, is the opinion of Imam Malik. So are you saying Imam Malik is deviant and sinful? They can't come close to say that or even touch that. But they're ready to bash you and tell you, listen, sister, all what you're doing is wrong, all wrong. You've been doing all this haram, it's all haram, you can't do that. They're ready to do that. But you tell them, by the way, what I'm doing is Imam such and such, approves, they just can't. The most that they would say, well, you need just to listen, you need to follow the dalil, not to follow people. I said, subhanallah, so when I told you that Imam Malik adopts that opinion, you think that Imam Malik is not following a dalil? So this is how you argue your case. So this is something important. I know I took long to answer this, but this is something very important for you to know, that you're never sinful because you are within a boundaries of this agreement. And the way that you think it's an area where you can choose between opinions, that it's legitimate when you study enough and understand that there is a room of legitimacy to that disagreement, like what we just talked about, a woman carrying, touching Quran. Now, somebody says, well, there is obvious proof. You say, where is the obvious explicit proof that Prophet ﷺ said a woman on her period cannot touch or read the Quran? If it's there, then do you think the scholars would even differ? So somebody will say, well, there is others that imply so. Well, here is the decide. It implies so according to the best of your judgment and understanding, and the understanding of the scholar that you follow. But it's not necessarily the same with others who did not see that it implies such way. And that's why the school of Zahiri, they differed and said, unless there is an explicit dalil proof that says so, I'm not going to stop a woman from reading Quran, from disconnecting with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'm not, unless you bring me an explicit dalil. I tend, because the question asked about my opinion, I tend to take that route. To be honest with you, I tend to nowadays not to see that it is healthy to ask a sister to disconnect with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a week or for 2 weeks because of her period, or for 40 to 60 days because of the nafas. I just don't see that. That's one thing. And I don't see that as something that I can adopt, especially that I take people to Hajj and Umrah, where she's leaving for the journey of her life, like the journey of absolutely her life. And then she goes there and she has her period, starts, or even with all the precautions that she took birth control pills and what have you, and that happens with me every year, by the way. Sisters that take birth control pills, but still the period still comes. I just can't see it after all this struggle, the journey of her life, that I'm going to tell her, well, just stay in the hotel, sister. I'm sorry, you can't enter the masjid. You can't go to the masjid of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. You can't go into the masjid of Al-Haram. You can't touch the Quran. You cannot carry the Quran. You cannot even recite the Quran, verbally. You cannot. I just can't see this is happening. So alhamdulillah, there is a room of difference of opinion, and we're not picking the other opinion just because of convenience. We were actually picking the other opinion because of the love and because of the passion to keep the connection on, especially nowadays when we are by nature disconnected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In the old days, they were so connected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if she would to leave, the Quran and what have you for a week, that's just a quick break so she can comes back full force, recharged. But for us, honestly, and I'm not saying this to be humble, this is absolutely the truth. We are absolutely disconnected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we are barely touching the surface. And then we come to say, well, you need to disconnect for another 60 days and what have you. It's very difficult for me to adopt that opinion with, of course, full respect to the majority opinion, full respect. So somebody that really adopts that, a sister that would come with me on the journey and would say, this is the right way to go. And I say, I fully respect that. I'm not going to tell her, by the way, what you're doing is wrong and you are preventing yourself from like the journey of your life. Snap out of it. There is a room for disagreement. I am your imam. I am the imam on this journey. Just follow what I'm telling you. Listen, I'm not going to do that. I will fully respect her opinion and her stand, but I would expect from her to do the same thing and not to go around and tell the sisters, well, the group imam has no idea what he's talking about and he is telling you all nonsense and he is making you being so sinful. How can you enter the Prophet's masjid while you have your period on. You cannot do that. And of course, she's passionate about it. But to be honest with you, most of the time, when I dig deeper with those vocal sisters, after giving her enough room to express her opinion, but that I see that she's expressing herself way too much to a point that she's becoming very impolite. Most of the time when I check deeper with her, most of the time they're not knowledgeable enough. She has no idea what's the opinions of the other imams and the school. She just adopted one opinion. She got really opinionated about it, and she got really passionate about it. And she sees that's the only opinion and everybody else is wrong. And that's why she's very vocal about it. But she doesn't know any better. But sometimes we have to be firm in order to teach others, there are others' opinion that we need to respect, inshallah. Other question is, if she waited to see if there was blood for 24 hours and there was no blood, does she have to make up the prayers for the time that she was waiting? That's a very good question. MashaAllah, all the questions are deep, honestly. This is a very good question. The answer is, again, remember when I told you there is absolutely no explicit hadith on these things. So those are all left up to judgments of the scholars. So the scholars that said she waits up to 24 hours, that after 24 hours, there was absolutely no spotting, no traces of blood, would she need to make up? The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Because they said, well, we gave her that period and she wasn't really sure, because the opposite is true for them. What do I mean by the opposite is true? Here comes the day of Ramadan. She is with the thing, she has no idea if she's clear or not. So she's just taking chances and what have you. She entered the day without a niyyah. She did not put a niyyah because she wasn't really sure, and her body trend is that more spotting would come. So nothing came for the whole day. What that day is counted for her? The answer is no. So as we are telling her, no, your fasting is not accounted, we are telling her also over there that no, you don't need to go back and make up the prayer. So what do we do in these situations when we don't have explicit proofs? The answer is your explicit dalil and proof is yourself. You are the judge, your body. So if she knows that her trend is that if she clears most of the time, most likely that within 24 hours, she's not going to come back with any traces of blood, I would suggest that she would take a ghusl before, and she would have the niyyah of clearance, and she would enter the state of purity, and she would go back to prayer. She goes back to reading everything. Maybe the only thing I would say to be cautious about it, but it's not haram at all, is maybe the spousal sexual thing, just because of the fact, and I have to be explicit about it because this is knowledge, and you need to learn it. How the scholars, why would they say avoid the sexual intercourse? Why? Because of the fact that sexual intercourse does involve physical friction, and intercourse means intercourse, that penetration that would irritate the skin again. It would bring back traces of no question about it. So, but these traces, maybe that's internal blood that was khalas, it's inside, but Islam didn't ever come to tell us, well, you have to check deep. No, Islam comes to say, you just check, regular check, and that's it. You don't need to do. Same thing with siyam. When we stop drinking, like at the time of suhoor, Islam didn't come to say, no, you have to dry every spot of water to the deep bottom of your throat to make sure that you don't swallow. No, we don't have that. So because of that, we say she is her best judge. She puts the niyyah, she clears, nothing comes back, all her prayers are good. All her fasting is good. All her reading of the Quran is good. She avoided intercourse with her husband because of the friction. Khalas, she's all good. 24 hours goes by, she's back to absolute normal status, including the sexual intercourse relationship with her husband. So that's how I would do it. If she's not that type of a woman and she has really ups and downs, no trend, none whatsoever, then she waits for that 24 hours. Nothing comes back of traces. She takes a ghusl and she starts from that point on. She does not repeat any of the prayer of that day, of that 24 hours. What is considered the masjid? I ask because there are classes in the women's prayer area. Do we have to miss those classes during our period? So masjid is defined where the traditional prayer area is, like what we call nowadays the musalla. Musalla is the masjid, really, is where people pray. So like in our masjid, IAR, for example, the second floor is designated for sisters. So that place is considered to be women's musalla, women's masjid. So if she does adopt the opinion of physically not being there, the answer would come back to be yes, she will miss out on those classes or any of the Quran halaqas or what have you. Because of that physical place, she can't be physically inside. If she were to adopt the opinion of the Zahiri because of what we discussed before, then there should be no issues, inshallah ta'ala. Now, the other opinion would not serve her much about the wudu thing, because the wudu thing was only for a janaba, remember, it was not for period. So even the opinion that we talked with condition would not help either, because that condition was if she would to make wudu, she can physically be there. That was only for a woman that is in a state of janaba. Janaba means that she doesn't have her period, but she had like a relationship with her husband and she didn't have enough time to make ghusl and what have you. She had to rush to the masjid, and she can make wudu and enter the masjid. That's with the conditional opinion. But if she has her period on, then the opinion that prevents her from being physically there prevents her from being physically there. Cannot do that. Even if she makes wudu, even if she does anything, she just can't be there. Outside of the musalla area where people lobby, classes done outside in the hall, that's no issues, inshallah ta'ala. I believe that's all the questions that I have. Let me know if you have any other questions, but I believe those are, I might just received one question now. So yes, I did. So it says, is it appropriate for a person to always choose to follow the more convenient opinions with the only reason for doing so is being more convenient? MashaAllah, that's another deep question. And the answer would be, and that's why sometimes I have a prolonged answer, but that's my habit. I just love to be detailed in order to just inform you more and more of other possible answers. And the answer was within that prolonged, but to summarize it was, if there is a legitimate reason of choosing that for conveniency, the answer is yes. Example, she chose to be able to be flexible on wiping over her scarf or socks just because of the amount of hours that she spends outside. That's convenient, but it's a legitimate conveniency. There is no issue, inshallah. The issue to your question would be, and some scholars have concern, she's in the comfort of her house, in the comfort of her washing facility. Heat is on during winter time. Air condition is on during summertime. Very nice room temperature. So there is really nothing that causes that woman or that man to wipe over their socks or her scarf or his turban or amama, except the fact, absolutely shortcut. but it's called convenience. That convenience is no. Majority of scholars says, no, we don't want that. Because that's going to give a habit of just, shortcuts. Is it haram? The answer is no. We just can't say it's haram. Because we don't have explicit also dalil that says, well, inside your house is not allowed, outside is okay. Those who said so with the analogy that, well, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did it outside. Well, him doing it outside to give a ruling does not nullify the fact that if it gets done inside the house, that it's haram, unless he explicitly says so. Unless he says, by the way, I have done this because we are on travel. I have wiped over my socks because it's extremely cold, or because it is so difficult to take off my khuf and my shoes and what have you. Unless he says that. So that's why there is a room. So what we would say is, it's not a good etiquette and a behavior to jump around for absolute mere conveniency with no reasons. But for legitimate reasons, yes. Again, legitimate reasons means that, she's doing it because of conveniency, but legitimate conveniency and what have you. Inshallah, that's no question and no problem, none whatsoever. And I want you to be adamant about it, but very polite and very firm with those that come to bash you around and to tell you, you're doing this and you're taking your deen, whatever. Again, let's take it step by step. You say, okay, with your opinion, can you tell me why you're saying that what I'm doing is haram? Well, Prophet ﷺ never wiped over his socks or inside his house. You tell him, okay, great. Give me the evidence. Where do you have that? Where do you have Prophet ﷺ ever said that inside your house you do not wipe? She will tell you no, or he will tell you no. There is no hadith that says that he did inside. I says, well, that does not mean that it's not allowed. I have a general hadith that says it's okay for you to do so. For you, when I have this general ruling, it's okay to do so, I will apply that okay to do so in public and in private. That's what it implies, unless Prophet Muhammad ﷺ himself says so. Do we have examples like that? Yes, absolutely. We have absolute explicit saying of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ only for travel, like breaking your fast. You cannot break your fast just because you went from your house to your work. But because you went from your house to a place that's far away than your normal distance, Prophet ﷺ says explicitly, just because you're on travel, you can break your fast. So there is an explicit saying here. So you would tell her or him, I have a general rule that applies public and private. You're telling me it's only allowed public, but it's not allowed inside private. I need you to bring me the proof, not me. I have a general proof. You're saying inside is haram, you can't do it, and you can't wipe over your socks inside your house. Then you need to bring me a proof that says inside your house is not. So you are way more stronger actually to argue. But again, this is not our stand. We're not here to argue, but rather to teach people. That's why we need to be very polite, very patient about it, but very firm. Firm, not because we're adamant, it's just because we want to teach people the true way of seeking knowledge, and not to be opinionated and not to be absolutely adamant about an opinion that we just adopted without doing enough research about the other opinions. So mashallah, our sessions are taking longer than before, but as I said, inshallah, after the 20 minutes, you are allowed, inshallah. However, tomorrow's session is going to take 1 hour, and I would like you all to be present, inshallah. So I would love for you not to leave the class after 20 minutes, because it's all going to be a review. That's going to be really pertaining to your test, inshallah. So I would love for you to be present and not to leave class. So try to arrange your schedule for tomorrow for 1 hour without having to leave the class from 2 to 3, inshallah. So somebody's asking for clarification. A sister could listen to the khutbah from a lobby. Yes, because she's physically not inside the musalla. If she adopts the opinion of not being allowed, yes. She can be outside of the limitation of the musalla prayer area. She can listen to the khutbah. She can sit around in the lobby. She can sit around in the next door room with no issue, inshallah ta'ala. So I have, as I said, if you need to leave, by all means, you can, inshallah ta'ala, leave. But I just want to quickly, because I saw that now more people, so I had, for tomorrow, I'm actually giving you heads up that tomorrow's session. So today I did end at 2:22, I believe. But tomorrow I'm asking you to really arrange your schedule to be with me for 1 hour from 2 to 3, because we're reviewing all the information. And every single question that you will have on your test will be part of tomorrow's review. So it's all about how good of a note taker, listener you are, of obvious hints that I'm giving you and hidden hints and in between lines, all that. It's all about your attention. So I do want you to be in a place where you're not distracted by surrounding around you. So I guess that's part of, inshallah ta'ala, your dedications as a student of knowledge. So I do want you to take all the measures of being attentive listener tomorrow, of taking notes, of slides will be provided. It's the same slides that you have, but it's really mainly my explanation of these slides that would really determine a lot of, not a lot, but a good number of answers. So yes, a lot of answers will come from the slides themselves, but also a good number of answers would come from my comments and commentary on those slides, inshallah ta'ala. So last question, it says, I am a little confused. So don't feel sorry, because this is fiqh, and fiqh is always confusing, especially for those who started on the journey of seeking knowledge of fiqh. But as we go on and move on, these terminologies, maxims, rules are going to become very familiar to, that you will start, mashallah, picking up the concepts really quick, because now you understand, okay, fard, okay, mandatory, obligatory, that's sunnah, it's recommended. Oh, this is an explicit saying of Prophet Muhammad, but this is just an action. This is a general hadith, as I said, that implies outside and inside, but you are preventing something from inside. Is it because of an explicit hadith, or is it because of being too cautious of the circumstances or the ramifications of what could happen, like when we talked about a woman having her period on and be physically in the masjid? Is it really because of an explicit hadith, or is it because of the fear that, because of the implication that could happen, we just need to prevent that? And scholars just carried on that opinion. And you see this a lot, by the way. Really an example that I want to just throw your way to kind of give you hints how tomorrow you will be easily to pick up. The four scholars, all the four schools say, if a man were to announce talaq to his wife 3 times momentarily, yani tells her, anti taliq, anti taliq, anti taliq 3 times, you are divorced, you are divorced, you are divorced, she's done, he's done, they can never go back to each other. And that's the fourth school, and it was carried on generations. So someone will tell you, are you telling me that you want to differ with the four schools? And you get really, really, really physical about it and vocal about it. And as I said, no one can come close to mess with the four imams, as they can say. But then you have like Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, those who came after Imam, that were able to actually be vocal to say, listen, with full respect to our respected Imams, this is not based on an explicit hadith. Because in the Quran and in the tradition of the hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demanded a period of wait for a reason. So someone got really frustrated, told his wife, I'm done with you. You are taliq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay, listen, that's not the end of the deal. She's taliq verbally from you, but she is awaiting a final divorce. And that waiting is 3 months. She's still your wife. She's still physically inside your house. She still doesn't put on hijab. She still does everything that she does except that sexual relationship between the two. What if they want to go back to each other? They go back to each other within those 3 months without a new contract, without announcing to everybody, we want to let you know, everyone, we want to gather everybody, by the way, we have divorced each other and now we came back. No, that's private, very private. Why do I need to tell people that this just happened 2 weeks? That person divorced his wife and then he's announcing that he brought her back. No, that's private. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah came to say, listen, there was a reason why there was that waiting time, so they can reconcile, mend, go back. It's going to be counted one, yes, but it's going to allow them to reconsider. And now you're telling me the same one who's frustrated, and instead of saying one time you are divorced, he got really, really frustrated and said, you are divorced, divorced, divorced. And now you are telling them they can never go back to each other, destroying the whole family structure. And now they're begging, please find us a way out. We want to go back to each other. And it's been generations that you can't. Khalas, you did it. You should be a man enough to stand up for your decisions. You took a decision to be vocal about it, and you wanted to show your muscles, and you said it 3 times, meaning what you said. We're not talking about somebody that went crazy and out of his mind started saying, no, somebody that on purpose said, you are taliq, taliq, taliq 3 times. So Imam Ibn Taymiyyah came to differ. It was an uproar when he did that. But then generations after, that's what's being adopted now almost all over the Muslim countries, all over the globe, that they put that period of time. So it goes back to the time of Prophet Muhammad, where there has to be that waiting period. They have to decide if she's coming back or not, if he's bringing her back or not, and what have you. That's an example where you become faqih of, okay, there was a difference. Yes, there was majority of opinions, but honestly, the minority opinion is based on a very strong hadith. So there is no room for me to say, well, I just follow the majority. La, not all the time. Sometimes we follow minorities because of strong stand that they have, inshallah. So I'm a little confused about wiping over socks inside your house. If it is just for convenience, can I choose to wipe inside the house? You can choose. No one can come to tell you it's haram. But is it the best of act? The answer is not. Because since you have no legitimate external reason to do so, as we said, you're not on travel, you're not at work, you have your bathroom facility, you have room temperature. So all it's going to take you is a few seconds to take off your socks, wash your feet, which is the ultimate way of having the water purify your skin, and dry, and khalas, pray. So is it the best of act if we wipe on socks inside the house? No. Is it haram? Absolutely not. We can't say haram. If someone would choose to actually wipe over the socks inside the house, is that okay and permissible? The answer is yes. To some scholars, of course. Remember when we talked about wiping over socks, we did not say that this is unanimous, this is by consensus. but rather we said that some have really been very adamant about no, it's only when it is for legitimate reason, mainly outside. Inside, only health reasons. Somebody that says, I just can't take off my socks because if I do, I will have blue toes, I get extremely cold. They have some type of health issues that's different than normal. So yes, you can wipe, but it's not the best of acts since we have no legitimate reason for wiping, and that just purely puts it at absolute convenience without having like external reasons for it. Yani if someone would to come and ask you, why did you just wipe on your socks? You're inside your house. You say, it's really the only answer that comes back and needs to come back. I like to take shortcuts. So if that's the habit, then the scholars say it's not the best of acts. Is it allowed? Yes, it's allowed. Is it permissible? Yes, it's permissible, inshallah. So inshallah tomorrow, again, a final, inshallah ta'ala, message that tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, we are having our review for the test. And the test, inshallah, most likely will be on Monday. So the whole session would be for you as a test on Monday. So you will have the weekend to study, inshallah, get ready, get nervous, inshallah ta'ala. But inshallah, don't get too nervous, but rather just nervous enough to push yourself to study well. And inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow's review should put you on a very, very strong path to get a very good grade. I just want you to be focused, and I want you to not have much distractions around you, inshallah. For inshallah an hour, 2 to 3, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan wa barakallahu fikum. May Allah reward you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. See you tomorrow, inshallah.